Host, John Keene. As always, I would like to thank you guys for joining me. Tonight we've got a pretty good one. We're going to be talking about the fall of Babylon, the hidden prophecies of the end. We're going to be looking at Isaiah, Jeremiah, the prophecies of Daniel, Ezekiel, as well as other ancient texts and mythologies that are comparable to the revelations of the end or the last days. I feel like really, when we look at what is taking place, across the globe with the current events, peace deals, chaos everywhere, the overthrowing of governments and, social upheaval, basically on a scale that's unprecedented, at least in our lifetime, right? I feel like this is, there's no better time than the present to really look at these things and see what the scriptures and the texts say about this. And I feel like it's very relevant to our time. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. Please hit the like, give us a thumbs up. If you're watching this, YouTube, Facebook, BitChute, Rumble, wherever you catch us from, make sure to give us a thumbs up. Share the link. That is the best way to support, is by sharing the link. It helps new people to find me. Keep in mind, we are viewer powered, so if you'd like to donate and support, you can do that by going to PayPal, Cash App, Facebook Messenger, or by joining us over on Patreon. All the links are in the description, and I'll pin them at the top of the comment section as well. So let's kind of go ahead and get into this. And I don't know. I think I'm gonna play a clip first. I was making reels and shorts earlier, and I stumbled across a clip of Terence McKenna, and he was asked about, the future of human consciousness and basically the future of humanity, and he gave a very interesting answer, and I feel like it's extremely relevant pertaining to the last days and kind of what we're all experiencing now and what we're all going through now. Basically it's the premise that before we can evolve and grow and kind of take like the next evolutionary leap consciously, before we can take that next step, it's like we got to be pushed to the precipice, and that looks incredibly chaotic. It's like we need that urgency. And if you think about, and this is just kind of my own little 2 cents, it's like if you think about what has pushed us to evolve, right? And what pushes any species to evolve? It's not being comfortable, It's that need. It's competition. It's growth. It's survival, right? It's when we're complacent, we're all watching, big screen TVs and shit like that. That's not really helping us, as far as like push ourselves to a higher level in any way, shape, or form. So here, I'm going to go ahead and play that real quick. Right here. Okay. All right. Right here it is.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. I look for the invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, possible human immortality, appalling acts of brutality, genocide, because the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed. The good news is that as primates, we're incredibly adaptable, going to be tested to the limits. What they see going on is the breakdown of all tradition, all order. They're quite right that it's happening, but they're quite wrong to conclude that it should be resisted or is somehow evil. The mushroom said to me once, it said, "This is what it's like when a species prepares to depart for the stars. You don't depart for the stars under calm and orderly conditions. It's a fire in a madhouse." I think it's just going to get weird.
I mean, think about that. You know, you don't depart for the stars under calm and orderly conditions. It's a fire in a madhouse. And it's like, if you really truly think about, you know, that statement in itself, it's like the gravity of it and just how true, like, to me, it rings, it resonates just on a very deep level, you know. I think it was Jordan Peterson, you know, he was asked about, you know, the psychology of man, and, you know, psychologically, like, even if we had everything, all of our necessities, everything handed to us on a silver platter from birth, like, we are a species, we are creatures that are built for adversity, and we're built to overcome in such a way that even if we had everything given to us on a silver platter, we would essentially find a way, you know, to create conflict and to create chaos within our lives, you know, in order for us to have something to overcome, problems to solve, right? And I think that that's incredibly true. And it's like, if you think about it, that's what stimulates growth. It's like we discovered fire because we had the need for heat and the need to, you know, stop food from having bacteria and things like that, right? We built houses because we needed shelter. There was always, you know, something, some type of adversity that we were facing that you know, stimulated our growth and pushed us to the next evolutionary level. And if you think about it on a, you know, the big scale of consciousness, you know, and this is humanity pushing, you know, to something far beyond what we can even fathom, you know. We have no idea what the next evolutionary link of humanity is going to be capable of. We know that the Bible says that, you know, we won't have marriage in the next life, right? There'll be no more tears, there'll be no more suffering, no more pain, right? So it kind of, you know, it kind of goes to show that we're on the cusp of some sort of perfection, right? That perfection, if Christ came as this symbolic, you know, perfection, man being perfected, right? And to show us what that looked like, and to give us that example to follow, right? And to give us that to strive towards, right? Because we couldn't embody that ourselves, you know. Then it would take a whole lot, you know, to push us to the level that we need to be, you know, in order to prepare for what's next. So we start first, and you know, in order for all of these things to happen, you know, a whole lot of chaos has to really kick off, you know. And you know, I've shown, you know, many times, you know, the comparisons to Babylon, and you know, I will put in some of the comparisons in just a second, but we're going to look at some of these, and we're going to go to the Greek and all that and look at some of the etymology of these words. But, you know, the United States is the modern day Babylon. It's the perfect model of Babylon. You have no other country that even comes remotely close to footing the bill like the U.S. does when it comes to, checking off all the boxes, right? We're surrounded by the three major, by all the large bodies of water, 3 major oceans. We are the melting pot of the world. And, you know, Babylon is referred to as a language of all nations, multitudes, and tongues. We are, you know, the richest country in the world. We have the largest military in the world, the most powerful country in the world, and we have intoxicated the world with our sins, right? American culture permeates the entirety of Earth. You know, if it's cool here, it's cool everywhere. You know, we have revolutionized the way that the entire world thinks, for good or bad, right? Like, no matter how you want to look at it, we've done that. You know, the world follows our lead. You know, that's why the president of the United States is the most powerful man on earth, because he's the leader of the most powerful nation. You know, and we fight proxy wars, we create alliances, everything is centered around the United States. So the fall of Babylon, you know, is really incredibly symbolic, because in the last days, when you think about it, it's it's like what man has built up. And, you know, I spoke about this the other day, and I truly, truly believe this, that because of the fall, right, in the Garden of Eden, we were essentially like poisoned, right? Like we have taken on some sort of virus, some spiritual virus, you know, by making covenant with the serpent in that moment and breaking covenant with the Creator, God. You know, we had already had a perfect creation made for us, and there was already a perfect understanding or perfect knowledge of what good and evil was. And when we ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it was to essentially take the model that God had made, right? The model of good and evil and what the world was, and all of these things, right? And we were in perfect harmony, perfect balance with all of this, because it was a perfect creation made by a perfect being, and the perfection of beings. And then we take it and we, you know, he says, you know, the knowledge of tree of good and evil, surely you won't die and you'll be like God, right? Meaning that we will judge what is good and evil for ourselves, right? So it's like us deciding what is good and what is evil. It's like, in, you know, when you're corrupted from the very beginning, right? When you're flawed from the very beginning, right? And you're taking anything less than perfect, you're gonna get imperfect. It's like we couldn't go up from where we began. You know, we could only go down. And because of that, you know, it allowed that seed to grow within humanity. And, you know, and because that corruption entered into us spiritually, consciously, genetically, whatever it is, you know, this curse that fell upon humanity from that moment, everything that we do, everything that we create, all of our knowledge, it eventually degrades and corrupts. You know, and it's like, you think about the flesh and the nature of the physical and the nature of the flesh. It's the exact same. It's like, you know, you're born, you grow, you blossom, and you die. You know, you degrade, you deteriorate, and you wither away to nothing. You know, and everything in this world is the same way. You can have the most pure ideas, right? The most pure concepts, and notions, you know, about the world. And we see this all the time, created with like churches and nonprofits and governmental organizations and political movements. And it's like, where they start off as wholly good and, you know, of pure intentions and a pure heart, and they're meant to do something noble, you know, and over time they degrade and they become corrupted, you know, either through ideological, you know, things. There's flawed premises and ideological concepts, or the men and women that are involved actually create that corruption from within, right? And we see this play out over and over and over, and the same thing goes for empires and civilizations and governments and societies, you know. And if you think about why, you know, the followers of Jesus or whatever would be the public enemy number one for governments of the world, it's not hard to see. You know, not only are you not able to be controlled, right? So if you are a follower of Christ, he says we did not love our life so much as to shrink from death, right? So we aren't beholden to any government or entity or organization. We first and foremost answer to God, right? So there's that, right? That's your true allegiance is to God and not a nation, not a country, right? And if the rules, the laws, the obligations, the statutes, whatever, conflict with the morality of your God or your religion or your Bible, right? Then the followers of Christ will die for that, right? Before they pervert that or before they go against that, they can't be compromised, they can't be coerced, they can't be, they can't be controlled. They can't be controlled. And I'm not talking about the fake lukewarm ones that all can. We've seen that there is a garden variety of those that can most definitely be controlled and are controlled and manipulated by the system. And they fall prey to that corruption that I was just speaking about, how everything in this world becomes corrupt. But those that are truly following, the principles of Christ, right? Like, that's why Jesus is public enemy number one, right? Because governments and religions, they want to be God, and the problem with that is whether they have all the power, all the military might, and they run everything in this world, and we know who they are loyal to, as far as spiritually, and who their covenants are with, because they have covenants of control, covenants of war, covenants of greed, covenants of stature, things like that, and it's all based on hierarchical nature of lineage and bloodline, and it goes all the way back to monarchs and secret societies and all of this, and none of that is of God, and we know that, right? So they have covenants with darkness, and we see that by the idols and the statues and all of that that's all over our nation. I mean, just look, Statue of Liberty's she's got the spikes of Hecate, right? She looks just like Lucifer, looks like a transgender on top of that. The flame of Prometheus, so on and so forth. And, the 50 stars going into the 50 sparks, the divine sparks that Prometheus took, which Prometheus is the light bearer, and that's, it's Lucifer from the Greek, basically, and we see this over and over and over. And that goddess Hecate is the goddess of witchcraft, sexual immorality, like this is what this country is built on, right? That occultism and that Luciferian principles of, of the liberty and all of that, right? Those progressive ideas, so it's like, even though they've created this structure of power, we've seen this happen time and time again, right? And that's almost why you can see, like, there's controlled demolitions of governments, I believe. It's because, like, they understand that too, just like Rome, Greece, Babylon, all of these ancient cultures, they rise and then they fall. They rise, they hit their pinnacle, they hit their zenith, and then they become corrupt from within, because man and everything in this world, becomes corrupted, and then we see this degradation take place, and they slowly deteriorate and usually implode, and out of that, something new is born. It's just this process. So, Babylon is representative of that world power, and we've seen throughout the Bible, Old Testament especially, and more in the book of Jeremiah, Isaiah, the prophecies of Daniel, Ezekiel, Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, we could go on and on about the different comparisons to Babylonian type of systems, right? World powers, world rulers that are on top of everything, and when they deny God, and when they go face to face and become adversaries with God and what's good and what's right, and they reach that point of deterioration where, greed overrules, where corruption overrules, where violence and war and coercion and slavery and abominations overrule, and become the premise of those nations and those empires, right? And they're at odds with the Most High. That's when you see their fall. And I feel like the United States of America, you know, the UN, NATO, and its allies, the EU, all of that, you know, these are all tentacles of the modern day Babylon, which is the U.S. And it's at a point of corruption, and we're seeing it all be revealed, right? Because we know in the last days that, you know, all knowledge will be increased and all things will be revealed. So that revealing's taking place. And so you got to understand that the revealing is part of, like, it's part of that process, right? It's stripped down, and, you know, all of everything done in the dark is brought to the light before it's brought to the, you know, brought to dust, basically, right? So we start off with Isaiah 13. And Babylon, the glory of kingdom, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited. Wild beasts of the desert shall lie there. The Quran, Al-Haggai 69. So as far as Thamud, we guided them, but they preferred blindness. The lightning struck them, destroyed. Hinduism and Vishnu Purana, cities built on Adama, immorality, are destroyed by divine wrath. The Norse mythology, Ragnarok, the cities and kingdoms fall amid cosmic upheaval. In the Hermetic and esoteric, we have societies built on pride and moral corruption invite collapse through natural and spiritual law. In Jeremiah, because of the wrath of the Lord, it shall not be inhabited. Put yourselves in array against Babylon round about, for she hath sinned against the Lord. And if you think about that, you know, she's sinning against God, which, you know, God is a representation of truth, right? So it's like, it's built upon deception, you know. God is a representation of, like, what is right, what is moral, right? Like the universal rights of all living creatures, and, you know, the universal laws. And when you're sinning against God, in essence, that's what you're doing, right? You're sinning against man, because whatever you do to the least of these, you do to him, right? So, you know, if you are, you know, enslaving, and think about this, and just, like, I really want you to think about it. Like, think about what governments actually do to people, you know? Anybody ever heard of targeted individuals? You know, they literally have torture programs, you know, you know, targeting their own citizens, you know, to coerce them, you know, politically and ideologically, and, you know, a lot of times religiously, spiritually, you know. And there is literally, you know, programs designed to keep you from, like, coming into total awareness of who you are as a being and who you are spiritually as well, right? Like, if you become empowered and enlightened, you know, you're the most dangerous being on earth to one of these, you know, governments, because, you know, you can't be bought. You know, when your price is your life, you know, then that means you have no price. It's like no amount of money can corrupt you. Nothing that they offer can corrupt you. You know, and when you truly believe, you know, that you are a spiritual being, you don't, death is nothing, it's no, you have no fear over death, right? You've overcome that fear. You know that it's just a transition into something more, and that you'll be more alive after this experience than you are currently right now, because right now you're limited, you know, by the five senses. You're, you know, the way that you're perceived in the world is through a very, very minuscule scope or parameters to be able to, like, experience the spectrum of things that you can even experience, right? When you think about it, we see what, 0.00001% of the electromagnetic light spectrum. We don't see past infrared or ultraviolet. You know, dogs can hear more than we can hear, smell more than we can smell, right? Like, we're extremely limited in our senses. We only access at any given time 10% of our brains. I mean, you know, and you even look at, like, the telomeres within our body. It's like they don't regenerate, as if something artificially soldered the damn things, and it limits our lifespan, you know, to where we can't go past 120 years. So we're here for a minor blip, you know, compared to, you know, where we came from and where we're going, you know, which encompasses eternity, you know. So it's really short-sighted to put all your eggs in this basket here, you know. And, you know, that keeps us, you know, and that keeps people from being able to be controlled when they have that full awareness of being a spiritual being, when they have that awareness of, you know, what they focus on is what they bring into their life. And you can call it witchcraft or if you want, but manifestation is real. You know, it's real. Otherwise, people wouldn't use it. You know, the law of attraction is real. Otherwise, people wouldn't use it. And see, the governments of the world understand this as well. That's why when they're pumping their witchcraft on people through the television, right, from Hollywood, which is the tree of a holly, right, like, or the wood of a holly, right, which, you know, is used for you know, a sorcerer's wand, and, you know, all of this is all witchcraft that's being put on us, right? That's why, you know, the channel is giving you your programming, you know, and it's predictive programming in a lot of cases because they're spells, you know, they're spells. That's why they're always built around the symbolism, you know, of certain colors, astrological themes, certain numerology or gematria. These type of things, you know, are always synonymous with the predictive programming and the spells and the symbolism, right? Because they're trying to, you know, invoke certain energies or use certain energies, right? And it's like a lot of times it's your energy that's being used, right? To create some sort of, you know, means to an end. You know, and we see this played out over and over and over through the crisis actors and the false flag events and all of this, you know. And it's a problem, reaction, solution. You know, it's like they're getting your consent, essentially, to participate in your own demise, to participate in your own, you know, spiritual death. You know, that's why you're not supposed to fear who can kill the body, but who can kill the body and the soul. You know, and these governments of the world, they don't want you to have this awareness, you know, because if you do have this awareness, like I said, you're essentially invincible against the things that they pull. You know, they have guidelines, rules, and restrictions, and the way that stuff works is essentially they can put you in a position, for failure. And I just dropped a video. I think I deleted it from my phone, but I posted a video earlier. It's like this CIA contractor and former FBI employee, and he's talking about basically entrapment, you know, entrapment and how they do people, you know. And he's saying, like, you know, it's called entrapment, but we call it giving them a nudge, you know. It's like whether they do a post on social media, because at this point, if they're willing to attack certain people, which they profile everybody, they know who's who, they know what you watch, they know everything about you. Matter of fact, I got a video on that real quick. Here, let's show it. Right here.
Behavior, because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. We love the country of Israel, and we'll do everything we can to support the country of Israel.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions, and my bias is to defer to Israel.
And they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. And safe means that the other person is scared. Mostly terrorists, that's true.
Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting every.
Yeah, so you can see they're constantly surveilling everything that you say, everything that you do, and they're harvesting this data, and they're using this in the feeds of your social media, and they're pushing this to you. And I'll show you the other one real quick. The guy, real quick, just so you can see it here. Where's it? Right here. Check it out.
You can kind of put anyone in jail if you know what to do. How? You set them up. You create the situation. And once they act on that impulse, then we call that entrapment. We call it a nudge. A nudge. A nudge. Sometimes you just gotta give them a quick look, just to see what happens, right? How did that happen? You put a post out there, or you have someone fake profile say something that triggers, that we know is going to trigger them, right? Like, we already know your history. If we're to that point, we already know everything about it. So we're like, oh, this will piss them off. Sometimes you light the fuse and just wait for it to follow. That's when we're putting out a fake social media thing to like really get people mad. Those fake news. Sometimes it's not fake. It's embellished a little bit.
Yeah.
You can kind of put anyone in jail if you know what to do.
And right there, they're telling you exactly what the fuck they're doing, right? They watch everything you do. They know everything about you. They know everything about you. And because they know everything about you, they're able to mine that data and use that, not just in, it's not just to personalize your feed so they can give you good content to watch. All of that is targeted as well. It's like to put you in these dumbed down echo chambers online. That way you only watch shit that confirms your biases and beliefs, or either, is in polar opposition to your biases, right? Because everything is anti and pro now, and they want to try to, reinforce these internet ghettos, basically, is what they are. And they reinforce these ideologies, ideological beliefs, or, narratives that they have created for you. And they do this through your feeds, and they can insert stimuli, not just through social media, but into your fucking life, because everything is directly controlled, through electronics and AI and, Wi-Fi and all of that. So it's like they can insert stimuli into your life, and literally it's to anticipate a particular reaction. They know if they inject this particular stimuli, then you're going to react this way. And, that's either going to land you in jail or, so on and so forth. And that's basically what they were saying, and here, I'm going to put this in here. And seeing right here, I just asked for the comparisons of the United States to Babylon, right? For those that say, oh, it's not Babylon, da da da. I don't know who would say that at this point in the game, but there, you never know. So Babylon in Revelations 18, it says, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, cinnamon, colors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and souls of men. And I believe I've hit these stats in the past. Babylon was a global trade hub, rich in luxury goods, opulent wealth, and economic power. Its commerce was tied to immorality, exploitation, and spiritual corruption, symbolically selling souls. In the United States, the U.S. is the largest global economy, heavily involved in finance, trade, technology, and cultural export. Major corporations dominate global markets, often criticized for exploitation, moral compromise, and influence over other nations. Some prophetic interpreters argue that America's economic reach mirrors Babylon's global dominance, with moral and spiritual influence extending worldwide. So, we have the wealth, commerce, and global influence right there. They check off all the boxes, and I believe when it is listed, they don't have this here, but if I was at my computer, I'd be able to show you this, but I believe it's the Hebraic Root Bible. They have footnotes down at the bottom of the Bible, and it talks about how there's only one nation out of all these goods and stuff that they list in Revelations. In this verse, they list all these different goods, and there's only one nation in the world that actually exports every single one of those goods, and it's the United States of America. So, take that for what you will. Number 2, we have the pride, influence, and cultural arrogance. And this comes from Isaiah 14. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell. Babylon's pride and ambition symbolized hubris and defiance of God, believing itself untouchable. Prophets warned Babylon would face divine judgment for arrogance and idolatry. And I don't have to really school you and cook too much about the different ways that the United States has defied, the biblical laws, right? And the laws of God, right? And this is one of the things, I've stated this in previous episodes before, like how any empire, right? Any great nation or empire, once they embody sexual immorality and homosexuality, right? Once they go, once homosexuality is a thing, those nations always fall, and that's statistically, right? Over time. Every time the nation embodies homosexuality, it goes down smoking. So, the United States is the cultural pride and global political influence. It may be seen as a modern analogous to Babylon's hubris. The military power, global policing, technological dominance, and ideological export can be compared to exalting oneself above natural and moral law, right? Like the way that we ignore what the Bible says about these things, right? Like, and we literally do all of these, and you could just, from fucking cobalt mining, African slaves for our technology, to gay marriage, to, you name it, right? The corruption within our governments, with the system that's built on borrowing, all of it, right? We have moral corruption and spiritual decay. This is Revelation 17. The inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abomination of the earth. Babylon is symbolic of systemic moral corruption, including idolatry, exploitation, and decadence. It represents nations or systems that lead others into spiritual compromise. And I just really want you to consider that for just a moment. What nation has led more nations into spiritual compromise than the United States? I know some people would say Israel is one of those nations, but I believe Israel and the United States go hand in hand. Like as the Babylon and the whore of Babylon, it's like And that's why the world calls, the United States the great Satan and Israel little Satan, because we go hand in hand. We work our corruption and our magic on all of the rest of the world. So, that's one thing we've been doing together for quite a while now, since 44, 48. So, modern critics focus on widespread secularism, entertainment-driven culture, materialism, sexual immorality, and political compromise. Influences of media, corporations, and global culture can be seen as analogous to Babylon leading nations astray. And it's like, think about it. We have Hollywood, we got porn, social media, I kind of had this thought about social media the other day too. It's like, if the Lucifer rebellion, the fall of Satan is kind of like this, the serpent in the garden is like this spiritual virus that man has, right, of corruption, okay? And if we kind of think of it as like that, in the modern age, and this is just, something I've thought about. In the modern age, when you think about how we've seen the spread of corruption and the deterioration of just people, humanity, our humanity. We're so much more dehumanizing. We have no empathy, no compassion. We have like this lynch mob mentality now. It's just, it's terrible. Like when you see how people are, when we're laughing at people getting shot and dying, and just, it's ugly. And it's like, if you think about the internet, and this is just my opinion, but you think about like the internet and social media, and it's like, how like whenever, an attitude is contagious, or like demons can literally can be spread from one person to another. You've heard of like spiritually transmitted diseases like sex demons and stuff like that. It's like whenever you sleep with somebody, you can get an attachment, because whatever is attached to them, can now attach to you. It has access to you. Well, kind of like the same way, like when you're interacting with somebody, if they've got like a demon or oppression of something, or, some sort of ailment, it can be contagious. Well, think about social media, and people having these demons within them for, to exalt themselves, and self-promotion and greed, and, to use sexual immorality and sexual promiscuity, and to like the spirit of Jezebel, and all the spirit of Python, and just all these different demonic forces and spirits and entities within these people, and then it's being broadcast, right? So it's being broadly cast. The spell is being broadly cast from the medium, or the channel, right, is broadcasting it out to the subs, right? The subordinates, the subscribers, right? So, I mean, the language is very, very meticulous and tricky with how it works, but it just shows you how the dynamic truly is. So these subscribes that are being programmed by channeling, this medium or brand or logos, right? Demonic energy, it's like it spreads like wildfire, through social media and online. It's like we wonder why we're so much more corrupt and evil and screwed up and more secular than ever before. Well, it's like, look at it, man. We have like the perfect storm, to kind of like spread and promote that demonic energy through online. We don't even have to interact with one another. It spreads from person to person. It's like a plague. It's like a plague of demons. And I believe there is an Illuminati card in the Illuminati card game that's literally, it shows like the Capitol building in DC, and it says Plague of Demons. plague of demons. If you guys are familiar with the Illuminati card game. Let me see if I can pull it up. But you see the global military power and influence, right? As well. And so, I mean, just to kind of like, you know, put that out there, you know, like I just, you know, I don't know how many people would agree with that, you know, or not. But, you know, I'm just saying, like, to me, that's a big reason why I think that we see shit really as crazy as it is now. It's like, you know, it's like you've got these spirits and they just kind of like can be transmitted from one person to the next very, very easily, you know. And you think about all the young people and think about too, and you say, well, you know, how can people be so susceptible? And it's like, well, think about it. Like, we have so many families that don't have a spiritual hierarchy or order in their homes anymore. There's no male who is the spiritual head of the home, whether you like it or not. That's what the Bible says, that the man is a spiritual head of his household, right? And, you know, and you have people that are living in these households that aren't married, you know, they're living, you know, they live like they're married, but with none of the obligation of marriage. You know, they're living with all the benefits of marriage, but with none of the obligations of marriage, you know. So you see that there, and extremely unhealthy dynamics between male and female just in general. Like, I mean, think about how perverted the roles have become between both sides. Like, seriously. You know, you guys can remember there for a while, it was like a major thing of like toxic masculinity and shit like that. And it's like, you know, when it was just really masculinity, you know, it was like, it was basically looked down on to be masculine or manly, or to, you know, to want to take the lead, or, you know, anything like that. Any, you know, to have that, to embody that role or that energy and be a male, you know, was looked down on. It was looked as if it was toxic, or, you know, something that was bad for society and bad for women and bad for families, and, you know, should be shunned. And what that actually did was produce overly feminine men, you know, men that were basically like afraid, you know, to be masculine. They were, you know, beta males or cucks or whatever, you know. People's got a few different names for them, but, you know, in there was this, and because of that, because of this over feminization of men, and, you know, a lot of this goes with the chemicals that they put in our water and in our food and all that, all of the soy that's being eaten, like, that's not good for us males. Like, we shouldn't, you know. And you wonder why so many men have fucking erectile dysfunction and stuff like that. It's like, think about the stuff we're eating, you know. And just to keep it all the way real too, for any male out there that may watch this, erectile dysfunction is a symptom of your chakras, your spiritual alignment is out of alignment. That's your antenna. That thing acts as an antenna, you know. And I don't want to get too graphic with that, but it does, you know. It lets you, you know, and it's letting you know whether you're spiritually aligned or not, you know, if you're in harmony and balance within, you know. And that can be brought out of whack very easily, you know. And it's like the things that you're eating and stuff like that, you know. If you're not eating, you know, enough meat or whatever, and you're eating soy products, and, you know, and all of that, it's going to have some damage on you. Same thing with you know, women as well. So it's like a proven fact that, you know, in nature, you know, when a female doesn't have like the presence of a male, they will take on more masculine traits out of necessity, right? Out of necessity. And then you see like a culture that has glorified, and basically, you know, it's basically put down women that are homemakers and raise children. It's like if you stay at home and you raise children and you cook and you clean and you do those kind of things, you know, it's like looked down upon, you know, almost. And you've seen secular society glorify, you know, the career woman and the independent woman and all of this, and it's like trying to like make women far more masculine, you know, and you know, and culturally, look, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, is all I'm saying. It's like, if the stuff works that well and it's so good for us, then why is it produce so many dysfunctional shitheads? You know, why do we have so many more narcissistic, imbalanced weirdos than we've ever had in the history of humanity? You know, people are just confused. And, you know, from women that want to be all the benefits of being a male, but, you know, none of the consequences of it, you know, to men that want to act more like females than females. I mean, you can see that it creates this strong imbalance. And it's like, then think about the children that are raised up like this. You know, it's like, this is, the nuclear family has been under attack. You know, this goes back way beyond this, but, you know, the 10-point plan of the New World Order written by Alice Bailey, right, where it talks about, you know, breaking up the nuclear family, basically feminizing males, making females more masculine, like all of this. And feminism has been, the feminist movement has been one of the you know, the biggest succubus spirits, you know, on humanity. You know, it's just stealing the life and the life force out of the very people it claims to protect. And what's crazy is a lot of these movements, like I said, and this is how you see like the deterioration, that spiritual virus, if you will, right, that's within humanity. Because it's like, you look at like the deterioration of shit, you know, the feminist movement, you know, it really was brought up because women were underrepresented at one time. You know, they couldn't vote. They had, you know, that they weren't equals. And it's like, so something that started off as noble and a good cause, and there was clearly a need for it at one period, it becomes corrupt and perverse, right? And now look at it. It's like, do you think you're benefiting women like by wearing pussy hats and all of this stuff? It's like, no, you're setting them back now, you know, you're setting them back now. And it's like this culture of, you know, and it's like, there are biases too, you know, like for the way that women are judged and the way men are judged. Sorry, it's just the way it is, you know. It's like, I mean, it can change in time, I guess, but, you know, it's been a very long time, you know, and it hasn't. So men are valued by what they bring, what they can do, the value they give, whether it's intellectually, physically, financially. Like, we're valued by what we offer, you know, what we bring, what we provide, you know. And, you know, women aren't valued in the same way. It's more because men are more visual and aesthetic, you know, so it's like more about, you know, purity and how pure they are, and their appearance, and, you know, it's still what they provide in an essence, but it's like men aren't looking to be provided for in the same sense. And I'm not saying all women are either, but, you know, you know, and then you see like secular culture that, where you've got all these women online that are talking about their roster and how many guys they got on their roster, and it's just gross. You know, it's just it's gross. You know, it's like, you're not a man. You're not anatomically, biologically, we're built different. If you go have sexual intercourse with a bunch of different people, it throws your pH off and you can get bacterias and all types. You're not made to do that. You know, your body's not built for that. You know, where we can just soap and wash it right off, dude, you know. And whether these are double standards or not, it is what it is. And it's like, you know, we don't get judged the same for the amount of women we've been with. Like, you know, I could be with 1,000 women and still go and start a family and have the same exact value as I had before, you know? I mean, in some cases, you know, women want men with more experience. I mean, this is, you know, and I'm not saying all do. I'm sure most would probably prefer not so much experience. But you see what I'm saying? And it's like, as in the reverse, women lose value, you know? And I'm not trying to be shitty to anybody like that, you know, like, or judge anyone. It's not for me to judge. It's just you know, then we create a society that's literally, it's like, so it's like when you're teaching a bunch of men, you know, to be overly feminine, which we lose value with women. Women can say what they want. They might act like they want us to talk about our feelings and all this, but they don't want, you know, a wimp. You know, they don't want, you know, a crybaby. They don't want that. You know, it's unattractive to them. They're just so primal and in tune, you know, like at such a deeper level than men are. You know, that primal nature, that carnal nature. It's like you can see two men fight, you know, and your girl will look at you different if you lose the physical confrontation, right? Like if you're not able to assert dominance, you're losing rank in the, you know, you're not as primal, not as alluring, you know, in a primal sense, you know. It's like, and women can say that's not true, but I'm telling you, nobody wants a wimp. You know, nobody wants somebody that's broke. Nobody wants somebody that's weak. Nobody wants a crybaby, you know. So it's like the same way. Like, men don't want a man. You know, they don't want a woman that's going to be extremely argumentative. You know, that's got a roster, you know, and she's, you know, and sees that as oh, well, it's the same for me as it is for you. No, it's not. You know, you can get bacterial infections by doing that, and you will smell terrible. You know, that's what happens. Your body will reject that notion. You know, biologically, it's not the same. You know, so I'm just saying there are vast differences, and these differences, you know, they are attacked and they're exposed, you know, and because they're exposed by this system, you know, we become weaker. We become more, we deteriorate spiritually, you know, emotionally, consciously because of this, you know. And the corruption caused by the Babylonian system, if you think about it, it's come through definitely by the attacking of the gender roles. You know, and it's like, think about, and you know, and to kind of like build on that, think about like transgenderism, you know, and gender fluid notions and things like that. It's like they remove boundaries, right? And when you remove these boundaries, you know, and I used to at one point in time, I'm telling you, like the new age concepts, they're really tricky, man. They're tricky as hell because they'll get you. It's like, and once you start to compromise yourself on one little thing, you know, you'll notice that it compromises, it's got a domino effect and begin to compromise so many other things as well. You know, whether, you know, it's like the Christ consciousness versus Jesus Christ, right? Like there's a compromise there. It's like, oh, well, either Jesus Christ was a real person, a real man, God incarnate on the earth, or it's Christ consciousness, and we can all, you know, Jesus was just a good dude, and we can all strive to attain that and achieve that. Well, it's one or the other. If Jesus was incarnate, God incarnate, then none of us can attain that, right? Or achieve that, you know, and he wasn't just a good dude, he was God. And then if it's the other, if it's Christ consciousness, then that means he was a liar on top of it, right? Because he called himself I am, right? He referred himself You know, when people say he didn't say that he was God directly. No, he didn't say those exact words directly, but he had many references to him being God, you know. And if you know the scriptures, he fulfilled all of these prophecies. The Bible is about him being God, right? So it's like, that's all a lie then, if Christ's consciousness is legit, you know. And then he's just a good guy, which he wouldn't even be a good guy because he's a liar now also. And, you know, we can all attain this through our own works. So salvation, none of that has any bearing anymore. It makes no sense. You need no God. Right? There's no need for God, you know, because you don't need saved. You don't need any of that because all of that premise has been wiped out, you know. And, you know, there's one subtlety, though, right? One subtlety. And you see what it has because of the boundary has been removed, right? The lines that were drawn has been removed. And now think about, you know, gender roles and stuff like that. If you're, you know, if a man can become a woman, then a man can also say that he's 13 years old and be a kid or a dolphin or whatever, right? And then, you know, so now that he can enter in a woman's restroom, can he also go to school with other kids? Right? Can he also start mating with other dolphins? Like, you start thinking about this, and it's like it blurs boundaries, you know, and it does this intentionally. It's a deception, you know, and it doesn't seem like, you know, on the surface, they don't seem like a very big deal, but what they do is they kick the door open, you know, for a whole lot of stuff to follow. You know, and the same thing with the gender roles, right? You see just how those little subtleties, it's like it's bad for a man to be masculine and provide and da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden, you know, he becomes weak. He can't attract females. He's more like a female. You know, women are more like men. You see the imbalance, and then the whole family unit suffers, right? And the child grows up without that balance, you know, and that understanding of the world and, you know, all of this as well, you know. And it's like we see corruption through this all the time. All the secular music and the media and all of this is pushing these narratives to us to like pervert the way that we see the world and pervert the way that we think and pervert our concepts of things, you know. That way we'll make these little concessions, you know. And it's like this is why you know, a lot of, you know, the religions of the world have become extremely corrupt, you know. It's like, because they make these concessions. They'll make concessions about, you know, certain things. Money, for instance. It's like, oh, well, you know, we're okay. We can love money because we're a church, you know, and we need this as a tool to do good and da-da-da-da. It's like they're picking and choosing, you know, what things to follow and what not. So we have the global military and the all nations influence, which, you know, I just broke a lot of that down, which he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Babylon's fall is mourned because of its central control and global influence. Its military, economic, and cultural power impacted surrounding nations, and the U.S. maintains global military presence on every continent. Political and cultural influence affects international policy, global finance, and societal norms. And some analysts draw parallels between Babylon's unrivaled influence over all nations and America's geopolitical reach. Then we have the judgment and decline in Babylon, Revelations 18. In 1 hour the judgment come, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Babylon's destruction was sudden, dramatic, and total, symbolizing the consequences of spiritual, moral, and economic corruption. Now, prophetic interpretations speculate that if the U.S. mirrors Babylon, its moral, cultural, and political systems could face upheaval. Some point to economic crisis, political division, social unrest, and moral decline as modern signs paralleling Babylon's fall. Now, think about that. You know, in 1 hour, all of this happens, you know. And when you think about, You know, just how short of a period of time that is. You know, people will be marrying and given in marriage, right? I will come like a thief in the night, right? And the thief comes at night while you're sleeping, right? You're sleeping. You have no idea they're in there. You know, it's like, you can think about other verses and parts of the Bible too that talk about how, you know, basically it's like people are bewildered. They don't believe it can happen. You know, they don't believe it can happen. They don't believe that our military can be beat. They don't believe that our economy can collapse. You know, they don't believe that this great empire can fall. You know, they don't believe it. And then it happens suddenly and instantly. You know, all at once. And I can imagine that too. You could imagine, you know, what that would actually look like, right? In 1 hour, what? You know, economic collapse, followed by civil unrest, followed by our enemies probably attacking us because we've collapsed. Right? You can see how, or rearrange those in any order you see fit. You know, an attack first, followed by collapse, followed by chaos, whatever, right? Civil unrest, you know, you can see that happen in a variety of different scenarios, you know. Oops. Now, I asked for the full prophetic version here. Now, the foundation of it is built on the Revelation 17. Okay, hold on. Let me go back here. And there came one of the 7 angels, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now, I want you to kind of go back to this too. One of the 7 angels saying unto me, and I should pull this up in the Greek. Let's do that real fast so we can kind of see the comparison here. I want to look at some of the etymology of this. I'm curious to see which, I'll do Daniel before I'm done here. I'll go back to Daniel. So, when I think of the 7 angels, let's take a look here. 17. Right. Okay. And came one of the 7 angels, of the ones having the 7 bowls, and he spoke with me, saying, Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, the one sitting upon the many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed harlotry, and were and the ones dwelling on the earth were intoxicated of the wine of her harlotry. So let's take a look here at G32. Let's look at the word angels here, and this is the Strong's G33 actually. And we have messenger Dodson, messenger envoy, An angel, messenger generally supernatural, messenger from God, an angel conveying from news or behest from God to men. Brings tidings, I want to see messenger, delegate. There it is. Okay, so we have the delegate word. So this would also probably derive, I'm going out on a limb here, but I can already tell because it has the delegate in there, that we know that Elohim means supreme magistrates, right? So when it says the 7 angels, these 7 messengers or stars, right, or magistrates, a lot of times these are interchangeable with the word prince as well, prince or princes, which can also be interchangeable with planets or luminaries, right? So if it's the 7 angels, to me, that would also be like the 7, 7 main planets we have, or also correlate to the 7 chakras. But those 7 main planets rule the 7 chakras, the 7 days of the week, the 7 colors of the rainbow, which the rainbow makes up the covenant of God. These are the rulers of the reality, the archons, right? And they're also known as the governors, right? Remember, archon means to govern or lord over and control, right? Government, right? They're controlling the mind, okay? Which, the mind perception is reality. So they are, they control the mental to control the reality, right? And the prevailing spirit of each. So let's go back here. Let's see what it says here. Primary meta of union and concord. Emphatic. So a single one. I wish we could find out which one this was, honestly, having the 7 bowls. And he spoke with me saying, "Come, I will show to you the judgment of the great harlot, the prostitute, or the great prostitute," right? And think about this too. We'll see a lot in the mysteries, right? If we're looking like in the occult, the mysteries, the prostitute or the great harlot, or the woman, the Scarlet Woman. A lot of times she's also synonymous with basically like a Abraxas, right? She's like the divine feminine spirit that basically anybody that calls upon her, then that's why she's a prostitute or a harlot, because she'll come to anyone that calls upon her, and she puts you through that dark night of the soul for initiation, right, into the mysteries, right? So you go through a certain spiritual death and are reborn into illumination or enlightenment or whatever, right? This harlot, and that's the spirit that's ruling this particular nation. So you think about, also it says one of the 7 angels in this great harlot. So if we kind of like putting our investigative specs on here, the harlot and one of the 7 angels, if the 7 angels are the 7 main planets, right? Could this, be, the planet or angel of Saturn, Satan? Or could this be like, the harlot being like Aphrodite, being Venus, Lucifer? Like what type of spirit or archetype is behind that, right? It's one of these main 7. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. And I will show you the judgment of the great harlot that's sitting upon the many waters. You know. Also, we know too, just to say, to me, this is symbolic of two different things. And I wish I would have got the Hebrew instead of Greek. But anyways, we'll deal with the Greek tonight. But when we are looking at waters, and an occult version of what waters mean is different than what we would think, like figuratively, or not, I mean literally, as opposed to figuratively. So literally, we think of like, you know, the many waters. And see, and this is how I believe all scripture works. You will hear people like Gary Wayne, which you can look at Best Damn Podcast 2. I got a couple episodes with Gary Wayne on there. But Gary Wayne says that, you know, everything plays out literally, like it's all literal. The Bible is to be read literally. And then he talks about dual prophecies as well. Dual prophecies meaning something that happened in the past, right? Like Old Testament, you know, and then something that also happens in the future, right? Dual prophecies. And I believe both of those are true. But I believe that because we are so limited, you know, in our physical essence, and consciousness just doesn't work that way. It's beyond just being linear, right? So when you have the trumpets, the seals and all of that, those are playing out simultaneously, right? So everything is happening multidimensionally. So it's like how you're like a 3D being, right? And you think of things playing out in like 4D or 5D, like on a spiritual sense. Well, think about that. That means there's multiple layers or strings of this, like kind of like playing out, and it's happening. It's manifesting itself in a variety of ways. So you'll get like the literal physical version of it. So it's like, oh, it's sitting on many waters, meaning a nation, right? Which means a flight of locusts. So I don't know how, you know, that translation doesn't really jive for modern day terminology. But so, you know, you've got, you know, a nation sitting on many waters, meaning it's all the major oceans, right? Sitting on the many waters. But also you can look at it, interpret it as another way, as the waters that, you know, from the firmament divides the waters above from the waters below, right? The firmament divides the waters above from the waters below. So there are many waters as well, not just here on earth, right? But in the heavens and underneath the heavens, you know? So it can be talking about the prostitute or the harlot that sits on the many waters. So it's a spirit, right, that's resting above the earth and under the earth as well, right? It's in more than one dimensional space, if that makes sense. It's a spirit that's not just on the earth, but it's also in the heavens, and it's also in hell, you know, if that makes sense, right? So it's like many waters, on the face of many waters. And if you think of like of the Hermetic text, it even kind of says that, and it's the Corpus Hermeticum, when it's talking about the moist nature being combined with the breath of God and all of this, right? So we can see this in occultic texts, you know, these kind of symbolic comparisons, if you will. And then think about Christ who walks on water as well. And then in the sense of the water, you know, we are made up of 70% water. The earth is made up of 70% water. In the tarot and astrologically, waters represent the emotions, you know. So there are many different meanings of what it means. You know what I mean? It's like, so this spirit, you know, rests upon multiple things. It's multidimensional, multifaceted, right? And I feel like all of these are like that, right? With whom committed adultery the kings of the earth. And then we look at like kings. You know, we're going to look at the actual definition of this one. king or chief. So there you go. You know, and like I said, the Greek is not as good as the Hebrew, but we'll take it for now. It's what we got. King, which means a king, a ruler, can be translated to emperor or a sovereign, right? So if you think about, you know, what that actually has meant in past texts in scriptures, you know, Old Testament, the kings of the earth, like the Sumerian kings list, Egyptian kings list, these weren't human beings, right? These were Nephilim. So, you know, the heroes of old, the men of renown, the great men, the mighty men, right? Gibborim, Raphaim, Nephilim, right? These giants, right? These were the kings, okay? So if we look at that, and then when you see the, you know, the king, the ruler, the emperor, or a sovereign, okay? You know, this could kind of, you know, play into both that. Not just kings of the earth as in, you know, the rulers of this earth, but who, you know, the God of this earth, who are the kings of this earth, right? The bloodlines of the kings of this earth, right? The bloodlines of them, it's of the fallen as well, right? So when she commits adultery with the kings of the earth, right, she's prostituting herself with the kings of the earth. So it's like these spirits that are with the, cohabitating with these Nephilim, right? The spirit being used by, you know, harnessed by this Nephilim spirit, this fallen spirit, right? So it like kind of takes on like this deeper meaning when you really start to look at it from this way of like, you know, seeing. It's like, oh, so these 7 angels are probably the 7 main planets or the rulers of the reality of the archons from these Gnostic texts, you know, and it's talking about a specific type of energy or spirit when it talks about this harlot, right? You know, and we can kind of correlate that to, you know, and I'm not saying this is fact, you know, I'm just, you know, putting it out there. You know, these are things that I think about when I think of this, right? When we have like kind of like the whole picture of all the different texts to kind of put this together, you know, and it's like in the and when you look at it from a polytheistic point of view, you know, it kind of gives it more body, you know, and more meaning. It's like, so when we're looking at this spirit that is committing adultery, you know, with the nation on the many waters, you know, it's like, we're starting to see like this is like, you know, a nation is, you know, it's like a legion, you know, and this could be like, you know, this is like a demonic legion on many waters. So that spirit is not just, you know, within, not just within, you know, man, but it's also at it's on multiple levels, right? So I hope that makes sense. And they were intoxicated, the ones dwelling on the earth. See? You see how it has this in parentheses here? So the kings of the earth and were intoxicated. The ones dwelling on the earth were intoxicated of the wine. So the ones who were dwelling on the earth were intoxicated of the wine of her harlotry. And he carried, so that's meaning the harlotry is coming from somewhere else, right? So the ones on the earth are actually being intoxicated by this spirit, right, that comes from elsewhere. And he carried me away into the wilderness in spirit. And I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet beast, being full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, you know, when I think about this too, to me, this kind of takes me, when we look at these names of blasphemy and all of this, this woman sitting upon this scarlet beast. Let's kind of look in here too, get more from the Greek. Scarlet, crimson, the female caucus of the cairns oak, crimson colored, from the kernel shape of the insect. Interesting. Crimson scarlet colored, the kernel of the grain or berry. These berries are the clusters of the eggs of a female insect. Interesting. A female insect. So we see so many comparisons. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this. Have you ever seen like Jonathan Kleck? Right? You guys ever watch Jonathan Kleck? Which, by the way, if he's ever watching, man, I'd love to collab with him one time or have him on. You know, he talks about how, you know, the serpent, you know, in the underworld and its comparison to the insects. And I don't know if he makes the same connection as I do. But, you know, the nations, and like I said, it means flight of locusts, right? Locusts are, you know, these insects. And that we even see like the Bible in the book of Enoch, when Enoch is like looking at the vision of hell. You know, the vision of hell is got, you know, it's all these worms, right? Like they're worms and they're like in this black ass goo and it's just crazy. It's gross. You know, they're like, so, you know, we are transfigured, given this new body, like made perfect and new. And it's like they are like, you know, they're like worms or larvae, you know, it's like in hell because they're like transforming into insects, the locust. And think about the locusts that come up out of the bottomless pit, right? And then you see this connection, this scarlet woman, and the scarlet actually comes from the crimson, which is a kernel or the grain of a berry, which is Ilex cassifera, which are berries or the clusters of the eggs of a female insect, the kermes. That's crazy, resembling the cochineal. And when collected and pulverized, produces red, which is used in dyeing scarlet clothing. So interesting, because you think about like all of these comparisons too. So this crimson is made from this, you know, this crushing of these insect eggs, right? And remember, she's getting drunk off the blood of the saints, right? So and maybe my mind just works weird, I don't know. But you know, you think about like you know, how the wine and all of that, like there's many, you know, the wine press and like do not harm the olive oil and the wine, right? Stuff like that. Like when it's talking about the harvest, you know, it's like those of the Spirit and the Spirit of God are always being compared to like grapes, olives, and wine, right? And then you kind of see like on the other side of that, like they're being harvested, you know, but it's like this crimson from the crushing of these insect eggs. Very different, but you know, I just kind of want to throw that out there. And then we have G2342, which is the wild beast animal, dangerous animal, derived diminutive from the same as, yeah, so the beast or the Antichrist, right? Beast or the Antichrist. This can go Antichrist, and this is also, I know this just from the Hebrew as well. The dangerous animal can also be as like a serpent as well, right? Be a serpent. It might even have this on here. Wild animal, beast, brutal man, bestial man, savage, ferocious. So, being full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads, and then, you know, this is what I was saying with the whole 7 thing earlier, how it talks about, you know, one of the 7 stars, and you have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and all that, and you have the 7 main planets, which, you know, also known like the 7 sons of Satan, and all of this. So, these 7 heads that are on the beast, could they be like the 7 main planets, 7 planetary bodies, right? That we know in all of the polytheistic religions. I don't care if it's Norse mythology, I don't care if it's, Greek, Greco-Roman, all of these different mythos surrounding like these demigods and these deities. These demigods and these deities, it's always like the 7 main ones, like just for instance, you'll see the same god, have a variation of like 5 different names in 5 different cultures, right? Like he'll be Zeus and Thor, and just he'll be known by different, Jupiter, he'll go by different names, and these names are synonymous with the 7 main planets, right? So these 7 main planets to me, make more sense, because the planets and what planets actually means too, as we see, biblically when it's talking about, the angels. So when it says Elohim, supreme magistrates, is another word for luminaries, right? Or messengers or watchers or heavenly host, right? So these luminaries, messengers, watchers, heavenly hosts are like the angels of the Lord, because the Lord is the Lord of hosts. But when we look at the ones that fell, they are different. They have a different naming, right? And there's 7 of them, which or 7 main ones of them, which make up, all of the polytheistic religions, the deities, the demigods, the sons of God, so on and so forth, right? And these are known, planets are called wandering stars, right? So think about the difference. You have luminaries, right? Which means like they're, illuminated heavenly host, watchers, meaning like they're just watching, they're not involving, themselves in any of this, to these wandering stars, right? And they're wandering because they've wandered, they've fallen, right? They've wandered off of, their placement. They're down here within the soul system within us. They're right around us, influencing us, So just wanted to put that out there. So could that be the 7 heads, and then these 10 horns? These 10 horns are these, 10 leaders. We can actually pull this up, but and being full of the names of blasphemy too. So another thing with the 7 heads being full of the names of blasphemy, and thinking about all what would kind of like encompass that too. It's like anytime I always try to think of like what would that mean. So blasphemous names would be names other than God. So think about like these 7 heads with names full of blasphemy. This are all those deities, demigods, right? Whether it's Loki, Odin, right? Like Aphrodite, Mercury, Hermes, Thoth, Zeus, right? Like Horus, it doesn't matter. Isis, Osiris, Libertas, Prometheus, like they have names upon names for all 7 of these entities, right? All through the world, all throughout time, and these are all blasphemous names, because these are names that are worshipped, as God or as gods that aren't God, right? So just saying, that's kind of like where I see that at. And then the woman was wearing purple and scarlet, gilded with gold and precious stone and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and the uncleanliness of her harlotry. And upon her forehead a name being written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. So let's just kind of take a look. I always like to see where these words derive from because it gives me a better idea. If we look at the etymology, because see, with our language, our language is so different, modern day English language, in like a contextual manner, as opposed to like, like the context of something of like ancient. It's like we are not even on the same playing field. They were their words did not mean the same as us. It's like they had slang and different ideas and all that around their words too, so just like we do now. So often used composition alpha. Interesting. So that's all we get out of that. Babylon meaning alpha, mystery alpha. Interesting. That's really interesting. Or a mystery, hidden, a mystery, a secret of which initiation is necessary. Whoo. Now tell me that doesn't give away, the shit right there, right? So Mystery Babylon, it's the great mystery of which initiation is necessary, right? You guys know any type of stuff that needs initiation? Anybody know anything that you need initiation to be able to get into it? Yeah. Just wondering, just wondering. I'll switch back to the black screen so I can see what people are saying in just a second. But anybody know any type of mystery religion that you need initiation to get into, right? Just saying, just saying, and then you wonder why our government is Babylon and stuff, and it's like, yeah, take a look at the Statue of Liberty, right? Libertas, right? Or Hecate, or Lucifer, right? Because it's a combination, or Columbia, because these are all amalgamations of the same freaking thing, and what it actually represents, like, witchcraft, idolatry, and sexual promiscuity, and then look at our nation, right? And the 50 stars and the 13 stripes, and just like, whoo, dude, all of it, like the occultic connotations to all of it, and at around every corner, from like the eagles and the phoenixes and all of that on the dollars and the seals and all of this, and the olive branches, everything has this occulted nature to it, and it's telling you exactly what's going on, what spirit this spirit is of, and this is a deception. That's why, and I don't know, which they took it down from YouTube. They did have it up for quite a while. I used to fall asleep listening to it. I don't know if you guys have ever read Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. Absolutely one of the most it was for me. It might not be for you. You got to be really nerdy, but one of the most fascinating reads of my life. Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. Because, if you want to learn some of the depths of this crap, and what all of this means, you go read that book, man. And it's long. It's extremely, extremely long. And you're probably going to have to read it 3 or 4 times to get it to really stick. But I did. But once you do, you're gonna see, like, how all of this in our nation, like everything from the architecture of our cities and all of this, like they use these angles and degrees and the whole Masonic building and all of that. Like, it's for the building of the Temple of Solomon, and Solomon used demons to build his temple, and it's like these rituals and all of this stuff that they have to do for initiation is this learning of the rituals. That way, if the earth was destroyed, anyone that has memorized all of those rituals to restart the mysteries all over again, you know. And if you think about all of the great floods and, you know, Sodom and Gomorrahs of the past, there's been many of these, you know, in Book of Enoch, and what many people believe, you know, second and third Enoch was probably more of Hermes, you know, and not actually Enoch, not the same Enoch for sure. You know, Hermes and Enoch in some circles are synonymous, because many people believe that, you know, Hermes, you know, was the one who wrote second and third Enoch, and it wasn't actually Enoch. It was just a credit attributed to Enoch. But either way, these mysteries that they get preserved at the beginning of at the end of days, you know, it's just preserved knowledge, you know, of these mysteries. That way, when it's all started over, you know, like think about these underground cities that hold 30,000 people. You know, these elites do this stuff over and over and over. They're doing it today. They're building bunkers today, you know, and they're all initiated into the mysteries today. They all descend from these serpent, you know, fallen angelic bloodlines today, right? That's where these 13 families come from, you know. And it's always this mocking of God, and what God does is like this inverse, this polar opposite of what God has done, you know. And it's like we see this today. So it's like, what makes you think that didn't take place, you know, before? And like, there's nothing new under the sun. And that's why we are able to have these dual prophecies, right? Dual prophecies, meaning it happened in the past and it's happening again in the future, you know, because we live in a cyclical nature, you know, it just cycles, you know, that, think about it. And if you don't believe we live in cycles and everything circles around and around and around, think about all of it. Think about the zodiacal wheel. It's a wheel, right? And it's a procession of the equinox, meaning space rips around us. I don't believe we're moving. That's just my opinion. I believe we are the center of creation. But either way, you know, so the sun is moving through the zodiac every 2,600 years or so, and just over and over and over and over and over again. You can use like a camera and like speed it up, right, to show the movement of the stars, and they make a circle, right? So that shows you right there the heliocentric model is flawed, and that things are probably far more local than we think they are. But that's neither here nor there. Then think about the orbits, right? What is an orbit? It's a circle. It's a cycle, right? Orbits of the sun, orbits of the moon, orbits of the planets, right? Even in galaxies are orbiting, right, around the galactic center and shit like that. So it's like it's all circles, cycles, you know? Solar cycles as well, from minimums to maximums. Magnetic pole cycles, right, to reversals, right, north to south, right? Everything is cycling, right? And, you know, and that's where we get like that Ouroboros, which is the serpent devouring its own tail, or the dragon devouring its own tail, which is actually also symbolic of the phallic symbolism of the masculine penis going into the serpent's mouth, the snake's mouth, which is the vagina, right? Feminine, you know, which is procreation or reproduction or reproducing, the same thing, right? It's like just over and over, a rerun, you know. But either way, you know, so everything is it's circling these cycles. So it's like the same story. Just like I was saying earlier about how we have like this deterioration consciously within humanity, within our bloodlines, within our spirit, right? From the fall, from the moment of the fall, right? And we made covenant with the serpent. You know, we allowed, you know, that double helix, right? We have the two serpents within us, you know, and because we have those two gods fighting within us, you know, like that, the one is a liar, you know, and And what it sounds like, just like think about this from like kind of like a logical point of view. Like it sounds like, Lucifer or Satan, got sick, like there was a virus, like he got himself sick through pride and, thinking he was God, it's like to the point he tried to create his own creation and rule it and everything, like that's a demented entity, and you think about like all the Gnostic creation mythos and ethos, think about like Yaldabaoth, right? The lion-headed serpent, who Pistis Sophia, gave birth to without foreknowledge without the father's permission, right? So she gives birth to it without permission of the father, and hiding behind a cloud on a throne. And he says to himself, there is no God other than me, right? Like it's pride. He didn't know he thought he was it, and the archons, and and basically he was a hive mind entity who made more beings like himself, which go into these 7 heads and 10 horns of this beast, and this spirit that's dwelling above the waters, because even in the Gnostic text it talks about the waters separating the waters and all of this, and how he hovered above the waters. So I mean, like, we get similarities. The only difference between a lot of the polytheistic, Gnostic, and occulted text and scriptures and mythos is usually the point of view. They usually don't really argue the details, if you've ever noticed that. I mean, I've done a billion deep dives on this channel. You guys can go through my library of, I've done everything from the Necronomicon to, the book of Pistis Sophia, so on, Hypothesis of the Archons, everything. I've done everything. I've covered every book, the Didache, just all of them. And it's like, no matter what version of these scriptures and texts you get, it's usually the same story, right? Or same part of a story. That's usually never disputed how it went. The only thing that's usually disputed is the perspective, right? Like the way, the perception of the story. It's like, usually it's like, oh, well, in this version, Satan's the good guy, or in this version, and it's like the only people that, really had kind of like and if you think about it, they were all driven out, right? The Gnostics were driven out, but, if you think about kind of what their ideology was, they believed in a demiurge, right? Which this demiurge was ruled by a chief archon, and we've seen, within, this, the king, chief, all of this, right? These angels, chiefs, all of that, right? So this chief archon, that, this pantheon of gods, and he's a deranged, crazy god, an evil god, and everything of the flesh is made by them, and it's corrupt, and that, and they believe that they're in charge. They believe that they're given power and creation to all of this stuff, but really none of it could even be possible if the true creator wasn't breathing his life into all of it from the beginning, right? And they called the Father, or the creator, the source, right? The ineffable, inexpressible one, right? So basically saying, like, every word that we can utter, it comes up short, right? It's like we have no word to describe what's indescribable. We can't call it good because good comes from it. And then you start thinking about, like, the ancient Jewish people and how they really broke down God, and it really starts to make sense. Like El Gabor, El Shaddai, right? Like these weren't different gods. These were different personalities of God. God was so freaking big that they would have to come up with, like, when they were dealing with different, like, strands of this God's personality, Like, that's how big the God was. It's like, oh, this is El Gabor. This is El Shaddai, right? Like, you know, it's like when you really think about it, you know, they were, and, you know, it's like they were that familiar, you know, with these different versions of God. So, where was I at? And I saw the woman being intoxicated of the blood of the holy ones and of the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And I marveled, having seen her, with great wonder. And to me the angel said, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast, of the one bearing her, and of the one having the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Even the beast which you saw was and is not, and is about to ascend from out of the abyss, and to go away into destruction, and shall marvel, the ones upon the earth dwelling, whose names are not written upon the scroll of the life from the founding of the world. Damn. So that's kind of a lot to unpack here. So let's kind of go through this. Start here. And I saw the woman being intoxicated with the blood of the holy ones. See, we don't really get. This is what I don't like about the, you know, and I know people love Hebrew, or I mean, love the Greek and all this, but I'm just not as much of a fan of it when it comes to the Bible. I mean, some of the Greek is very helpful, you know, and I've talked about some of the words, which I'm not good at pronouncing, like telestai or whatever, when it's talking about, you know, it is finished on the cross. It's like it's like a word that means, you know, it's legally debt is paid, financially a debt is paid. Oh shit. Financially a debt is paid, you know, and like physically something is ended, or the, I know I'm going to say this wrong, like metaskitamamoyer or whatever, which when they're talking about the angel of light, which, you know, Satan comes as an angel of light, or Lucifer comes as an angel of light. It's, you know, that means a shapeshifter, right? So that's literally a reptilian, you know, a shapeshifter. You know, so you get some of the words that like really give you some good meaning to it, you know, but some of them, you know, I feel like you just get better out of the Hebrew. The mystery of the woman. Remember, the mystery means like a mystery, something that you have to be initiated, right? The one bearing her and the one having the 7 heads and the 10 horns, and the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And even the beast which you saw was and is not, and is about to ascend from out of the abyss. And we know that, you know, the beast that is about to ascend from out of the abyss is Abaddon. Oops. Boom. And Hebrew, Abaddon primarily means destruction or place of destruction, and used to refer to the underworld, or he's the Lord of the underworld, the realm of the dead in the New Testament. Is also known as the destroyer, or Apollyon in Greek, and is associated with judgment over the underworld. The meaning, the word comes from the root, which means to destroy or to perish. And it's often paralleled with Sheol to describe a desolate place or the abode of the dead. And it signifies a place of ruin or perdition, highlighting mysterious nature of the afterlife that is only fully understood by God. So remember, we're talking about the mystery of this too, you know, which is only fully understood by God. And the beast that comes up out of the abyss or the underworld, which is Abaddon or the destroyer. Now think about the destroyer here. I wish I had it on this specific text. I should have fucking... I'm gonna have to start adding my books on here, but which I will the next time. I'll have them on here ready to go. But in the Colburn Bible, let's see if we can get a little background on the Colburn for people. Colburn Bible. Colburn Bible. History. The history of the Colburn Bible is a contentious subject. It is presented as an ancient Egyptian and Celtic text, purportedly salvaged in 1184. Think about that, dude. Proponents claim it is a 3,600-year-old secular theology that was written at the time of the Old Testament, and it contains pre-biblical accounts and prophecies about celestial events like a destroyer or frightener and details of advanced ancient civilizations. However, its origins and authenticity are debated, with some categorizing it as a modern pseudo-pigraphical text or part of the Apocrypha, which some of the books are apocryphal texts that are within it. But this one, I'm telling you, dude, this is a bad mother jammer. So let's see if we can get some of this to pull up here. I want to show you on this. So, in the Colburn Bible, they have 3 chapters written on the Colburn. Right? So the Colburn Bible is the ancient collection said to be... So remember, they were talking about this angel that comes up out of the abyss, right? And this is Abaddon or Apollyon, aka the Destroyer. This is why I'm taking you to the Colburn. So the Colburn has 3 chapters written on it purely about the Destroyer. And this gives you a hella bigger idea on why Moses, when he went on Mount Sinai, he thought the God was, fire and pillars of smoke and all of this. And what happened to them in the Colburn, right? Which they talk about that in the last days that people will have the great book of wisdom before them and they'll ignore it, right? Meaning the Bible. Meaning they'll have the book of wisdom, the great book of wisdom, and they'll still ignore it. Talks about wayward sons and everything. So, here we go. The Bronze Book, which is the Egyptian text, alleged to date back to the aftermath of the Exodus. And basically what it is, it's like this written account of Exodus, but it's from the perspective of the Egyptians, basically, right? So it's like you see Moses, it talks about this Pharaoh, and he's chased off and all of this, right? And the parting of the Red Sea, it talks about all of it. I've covered this quite a bit, too. And then the Kolbuk, which is the Celtic text, containing wisdom and prophecies and moral teachings. Now, the Destroyer, or the Cosmic Harbinger. In the Colburn Bible, the Destroyer is described as a fiery celestial object that appears in the skies before great cataclysms. It's often linked to events like the flood and the plagues of Egypt, almost as if it's a recurring agent of divine judgment. Here's one of the key passages. Ooh, this is so good, man. Men forget the days of the Destroyer Only the wise know where it went, and that it will return at the appointed hour. Another passage. When blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear, and mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed, and all living things engulfed. Waters will be swallowed up by the land, and seas will boil. This suggests that the destroyer is not merely a metaphor. It behaves like a planetary or cometary body, a massive celestial object causing gravitational and atmospheric chaos. Throughout the text, the destroyer is described in powerful, almost mythic terms. It is a great red light in the sky, seen even at midday. It was born of darkness and flame, a dragon of the heavens. It roared across the sky like 10,000 thunders. It twisted about itself like a coil. Some interpretations link it to the winged disc of the Egyptians, the fiery dragon or red planet, leading many researchers to connect it with the idea of Nibiru or Planet X. The supposed rogue planet described in Sumerian and later esoteric traditions. And, and just to kind of give you some context on that too, in the Enuma Elish, Marduk is described as Jupiter, and it's Jupiter. So Marduk is Jupiter, right? And then, so this just kind of give you some context when it's telling you that it's this red planet and all this. So kind of, get with me on this. So Marduk is Jupiter in the Enuma Elish, which is Babylonian text, and then, in Babylonian, Nibiru also means Jupiter, right? So, and I've done many videos, right, talking about the possibility of Nibiru or, the destroyer being Jupiter. And here's another thing that I find to be kind of wild, kind of creepy, right? This is a little creepy. So, whenever this thing appears, right? Whenever these ages end, whenever the end of the ages come about, they are always preceded by, the signs in the skies and all of that, right? So, we have the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, right? The Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. Now, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, the last one we had was December 20, it's on the solstice, December 21st of 2020 was the great conjunction, the last one we had. But we have more conjunctions than just that. We had one, an almost exact conjunction 400 years before that. And then I want you to think of like when the last kind of like mud floodish era would be. And that would be about like, 1750s, something like that. It would be about 400 years ago, right? A smaller reset. And then the one before that was 800 years ago, right? So almost 1,000 years ago, right? And that was a big conjunction. And every time these conjunctions happen, a lot of them coincide with cataclysmic and biblical events on the earth, right? It's like a warning. And what you see astrologically or celestially is how Saturn is basically in like the story of Thor, or, whatever, right? The son of Kronos, right? How Kronos eats all of his children, right? Well, his wife tricks him and gives him a stone to eat, for, what is it? Is he Thor or Jupiter or whatever, right? In this story. He's Thor, I believe. So, to allow him to grow up, and sneaks him away, and because he was told a prophecy, his dad was told a prophecy, which I believe was Uranus or Neptune, one of the two, and Gaia, which were the primordials, right? They had the prophecy that his son would usurping. His son usurped him, which was Kronos, which is Saturn or Satan, right? Then Saturn or Kronos gets another prophecy that says his son will usurp him. So he just, because he did it to his dad, he decides to eat all his children, right? So he eats all these other main planets, which, think about the concept of like the solar system. He ate all the planets, right? Get it? They were all within his soul system. And then, except the one son, right, which is Jupiter or Thor or whatever, right? And he ends up usurping his father. Well, in that great conjunction, what we see is a celestial alignment where Jupiter actually goes in front of Saturn in the sky. So he literally usurps him in the sky. And when they are in alignment, this is where you get the winged disc, right? Because you see the red striped planet of Jupiter, right? And behind it, you have Saturn and its rings, and it looks like the red striped planet with wings, right? Like Nibiru, like the traditional images of Nibiru, right? So, just saying, that's where we get all of that from, you know? And it's a harbinger of the last days. Now, here's the thing, you know, and I've heard of this too, and I've heard it put forth by other people, like, you know, thinking of basically like, essentially like, you know, Jupiter, you know, it's a star as well. You know, remember, these are wandering stars, right? The planets, you know, and it's not like what we've been taught, you know, by the, you know, general relativity and heliocentric models and all of this, right? Mainstream academia, science, and all that. No, right? Not the same. But that it's on like a different type of orbit, like a different, you know, orbit, and that, you know, you've seen like the movie like Jupiter Ascending or whatever, right? Like that's actually what it does. It's like, you know, or the Wandering Earth, where it slingshots past Jupiter, right? But Jupiter Ascending, to where it's like every so often it comes in, and it's like, you know, and people even believe that Earth was once, you know, a satellite of Jupiter, you know, or Saturn or one of these other planets, and got thrown out of orbit even, right? I don't know if that's true. I doubt it, but that's, you know, people have speculated that. And that every like 12,500 years or 24,000 years, whatever, its orbit crosses in such a way. And remember, Nibiru means planet of the crossing, or the transitional planet. And that's where we get the modern day Vatican, right, from Rome, because Constantine was out on the battlefield and he seen the sign of the cross in the sky, and he heard, under this sign, you will win, or something like that, right? Which told him, like, to fight under this sign and he will win, right? Which he took it as, like, riding with a cross, right? And then we had Rome, which converted from a political government to, you know, the religious, you know, power that it is now, which is the Vatican and the head of Christianity, right? Right, but that planet of the crossing means a transitional planet, which means it pops up at the end of the age, and it's a conscious transition, right? So the crossing, you know, allegedly, if Nibiru and Babylonian is Jupiter, and if Marduk, who ascended and done all this damage and destroyed Tiamat and all of this in the, you know, the ancient epics as well, and Earth could even be a piece of Tiamat, you know, you know, what Jupiter actually does is like ascend over the Earth, like goes up, you know, from beneath us and over top of us every 12 to 25,000 years or whatever, right? Maybe even 36,000 years, but every so often, right? This happens cyclically, you know, and when it does, it creates this destruction, you know. So, you see, according to the Colburn, and it's like, even if it isn't Earth, you know, and it's, or Jupiter, and it's some other celestial body. It still happens cyclically, and it's been recorded. And you think about, the great and terrible day of the Lord, right? And the destruction of fire, and all of this, man. It's like it really starts to fit in, right? So, according to the Cauldron, every appearance of the destroyer brings a global reset. Floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and societal collapse. And think about Babylon being destroyed in an hour, Some people don't know this, but I started this channel years ago because of a dream I had. And this is pretty crazy, of a giant red striped planet. And that's what happened, It was like I was like watching out of a window, and the sky was like blood red. Everybody in the room, when the sky turned blood red, all of a sudden everybody in the room with me's eyes turned solid black, and they became extremely demonic, very, very demonic, like demons. But they couldn't hurt me for whatever reason. I knew it was because of God, like I was protected, So as I walked out of the room, they just like kind of parted, like they couldn't touch me even because of whatever was in me. And I walk outside, and I like walk under this arch, this old, what looked like a ancient Roman arch. And I heard, everything that can be shaken will be shaken, is what I heard in the dream. And next thing you know, I could see like this red fireball off in the distance, like, and then all of a sudden I like looked to one side of the horizon, and I could see what looked like, fire raining down. It looked like meteors or fire or plasma is what it really looked like plasma balls or something, like raining down on one side of the earth. And then as I scanned over more, I seen this giant brown looking moon that had already hit the earth. And I could see it like at the bottom of the horizon, and it was broken up in like 4 pieces. And I could see like the pieces of the earth that was like coming off in slow motion, because it was like in space, like from where it had already impacted. And then by the time like my field of view got to right in front of me, out of freaking nowhere, that red fireball was gone from where it was, and it was boom, it come up from underneath the earth, and it just covered the entire sky. Like you couldn't see anything but this planet. And then I heard the words, "Trust God, John," and the earth started shaking like nobody's business. I mean, every building crumbled like sand. When this thing popped up, cars were like just running over people and like crashing everywhere. Like people had went crazy, like just from the appearance of this thing, like they went insane. People were jumping off of buildings and taking themselves out and running around pew-pewing, and just, it was crazy. People had went nuts. Everybody lost their shit instantly. And then everything was shaking, and seriously, I was like with my kids, and it was like we literally did not move. That's the crazy part. We did not move while that was happening. So, and that, and I woke up, and when I, I woke up, it was a powerful, powerful vision. I never had anything like that in my life. And I mean, you're talking about like something to totally change your life around. Like, that was it, dude. That was it. That was something that really, I wasn't religious or anything. I was not into any of that stuff, and had that experience, and it totally changed me as a person, truly. And after that, I started researching this stuff, and I just literally, and I had asked God too, and this is the crazy part, they say not to test God and stuff. I didn't test God, but I asked God before this happened, this dream. I said, I want to know the truth about everything. I want to know if Jesus is real. I wanted to know the truth. I was sick of imagine me back then, being sick of being lied to and not knowing, what was what. Little did I know, that 8-9 years later, that it would be way worse as far as like deception goes, and that nobody would have a clue what was real and what was true and what was false. But I wanted to know the truth, and that's what I asked for. And I said, if you show me the truth, I will give you my life. And God answered, delivered in the biggest way ever. So, and that's why I started, doing content. I started studying, and I really started trying to disprove all of it, really. But I'll keep going. So it says about the doom shape. The doom shape, called the destroyer in Egypt, was seen in all the lands thereabouts. In color, it was bright and fiery. In appearance, changing and unstable. It twisted about itself like a coil. It did not remain in one place, but passed over with great sound and fearsome display. When it passed, men rose up against those in power, for the air was filled with corruption and confusion. Then came the great judgment, and all was made new. The renewal implies cyclical destruction and rebirth, a theme consistent with esoteric cosmologies in the Hindu, the Yugas, Mayan, and the cycles. Some scholars and mystics interpret the destroyer not just as a celestial object, but as an archetype of purification, a divine mechanism that restores balance when corruption and evil dominate humanity. In this sense, it parallels Revelation's wormwood. And if you think about that, wormwood is it stands for bitter or radioactive. And it's a star, a star that falls to the earth, right? Turns all the waters to blood and, all of that, right? Cause the mountains to open up. Same thing. Same exact thing. The red dragon of Revelations 12, which the Revelations 12 prophecy, one of the earlier things that I covered in my career, September 23rd, 2017, so think about all this symbolically too, man, and just how it kind of fits in with all this. Remember, we talked about December 21st, 2020 being on the solstice, being the great Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, right? Which is it's that symbolic harbinger, right? That usurpation of Jupiter, taking the throne. And Jupiter is, the king planet, right? Taking the throne from Saturn or Satan, and Jupiter's the oldest sun. And then September 23rd, 2017, what many people believed was the great sign in heaven. It happens only once in 7,000 years, and it was a celestial alignment of the woman and the dragon. She had the sun over her shoulders, which was the constellation of Virgo, over her shoulders, and the moon under her feet. And then she had a crown of 12 stars on her head, which was a constellation of Leo. And then it was Mars, Mercury, and Venus in conjunction. And then she was given birth to a child, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron rod or an iron scepter. And lo and behold, who did she have in her womb? Jupiter. For the gestation of 42 weeks, or approximately 9 months, the time it takes to birth a child. So, you can't make this stuff up. And then, boom, 42 months later, guess what? And then think about the time, and half a time stuff in the Bible of the 42 months, right? Then we had, and this is kind of goes to show, so I think it was March 21st, 2021 was the approximate 42 months later. So we had, at the end of 2020, we had that great Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. And then March 21st, 2021, which was the 42 months later from that great sign, we had the passing of the asteroid Apophis, right? Which was the god of chaos and darkness. Now remember, Apophis is coming back in 2029 and 2036 or something like that. So, you know, and these are the two times that it could actually hit our ass. So, just saying, you know, and Apophis in Egypt, right? Apophis in Egypt, you know, he was very symbolic. And I'd shown, and he was known as Apep, right? And I've shown like the image of here, I'll show it right here. Show you the image, right? And they show like this celestial image that very much matches this. So hold on. Apep. Right here it is. And see, it's a serpent or whatever. Where's the image though? Hold on. I don't see the image on here. I might have to. There it is, right here. This is the image. And take a look, right? Right? See the serpent or Apep underneath, right? It comes up from underneath, right? Right, and you have the red planet. See what I mean? Right there. You know, if you think of like the boat or whatever that they're on is like Earth, you know, you have above the Earth, you know, is the celestial spheres, right? Jupiter and all of that, right? And then below is Apophis, right? Coming up from underneath, right? And they're like fighting it off. So I'm just throwing it out there, man. I'm not saying it's how it is, but you know, you can see here it's also known as Apep or Apoph. It's the ancient Egyptian deity of what? The underworld. The underworld. And what is the abyss? The underworld. Sheol, right? Just saying. Throwing it out there. I'm telling you. Who embodied darkness and disorder and was thus the opponent of light and Mayat. So truth and light, right? And Ra was the bringer of light and hence the biggest opposer of Apophis. So the god of light, right, and truth, he was in opposition. This is the god of chaos and darkness, the lord of the underworld here, right? Popping up, you know. Just saying. Tell me this ain't, you know, this is what I mean. Like, there is no such thing as coincidence. And then you got this image, and he's coming up from underneath the damn earth, right? With the red planet, right? The winged disc. Just saying, dude. No such thing as coincidence. No such thing as coincidence. You know? And then we took those Bible verses, and what did we do? We compared them, right? We compared them, and what they compare to. Right? The destroyer. Right? The destroyer. Now let's go back here. So we have the comparison to Revelation's wormwood, the red dragon, the day of the Lord, the Hindu Kali Yuga's final destruction, Zoroastrian Sakyant purifications. And it is the agent of apocalypse and rebirth, the cosmic cleanser that burns away the world's impurity before the dawn of a new age. So the modern theories between the Colburn destroyer and astronomical phenomena, we have Planet X Nibiru hypothesis, the hidden planet or brown dwarf that periodically enters the inner solar system, a cometary body, possibly a large comet or debris swarm causing gravitational disturbances. Plasma event, solar micronova, recurring energetic eruptions from the sun, matching ancient cataclysm records. And the Colburn itself says, when ages pass, certain laws operate upon the stars and the heavens. Their ways change. There is movement and restlessness. They are no longer constant, and a great light appears redly in the skies. Yes. Yeah, wild. And it is wild. It's extremely wild. Extremely wild. And, you know, and see, and here's another thing, which, you know, before I wrap up, which I'm getting close here. Before I wrap it up, I will try to maybe pull up a little bit. You guys know of, you know, the Hopi prophecy too, right? When it talks about, you know, the great purifier, right? The blue and the red Kachina, you know. So like we have this being compared, you know, in multiple levels. Show you every passage from mention destroyer. All right. Here we go. And this is the different passages that mention it. The Colburn's internal numbering in manuscripts titles vary by edition. Heavenly restlessness and omen. The Colburn warns at certain ages the stars in heavenly order becomes restless. This unrest precedes the appearance of a great red light or object, the destroyer, which is not simply a star but a disruptive celestial presence whose coming signals catastrophic change. When ages pass, there is movement and restlessness. The destroyer's arrival is tied to shifts in celestial mechanics. Memory and return. People forget the memory of previous visits of the destroyer. Only the wise remember that it once came and that it is appointed to return. The text treats the destroyer as a cyclical phenomena, not an isolated myth. Men forget about the days of the destroyer. When the destroyer arrives, cataclysm follows. Mountains erupt. Fires and ashes cover the land. Trees are destroyed. Waters are disrupted. Seas can be swallowed or boil in the scene described in planetary scale, geological and atmospheric upheaval. Mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes, or fire and smoke is what it says actually. The Colburn equates the destroyer's visit with volcanism, seismic upheaval, and dramatic climate and sea changes. The appearance and its nature. The destroyer is described as a bright, fiery object, unstable in appearance, sometimes compared to a dragon or a worming, twisting light. It did not remain in one place, but passed over with a great sound and fearsome display. It twisted about itself like a coil, meaning a vivid, dramatic, fiery dragon imagery, cosmic object that produces loud, terrifying phenomena. After the destroyer's passage, societies break down. Corruption fills the air, literally and morally. Men rise against rulers, confusion spreads, and the destruction acts as a purifier that allows a new order to emerge. Then came the great judgment, and all was made new. The doom shape, the red visitation, or the fiery harbinger, all terms used to describe the same phenomena from different vantage points. The Egyptian located narratives or the Celtic wisdom verses and priestly commentaries. Recurrent motifs is midday brightness, a red or fiery disk, and sounds like thunder or subsequent geological and meteorological chaos. A great red light in the sky seen even at midday. The Colburn's language treats the destroyer like a real, physical, celestial body, comet, rogue planet, or energetic object that causes tidal, atmospheric, and geological effects. And you know what? I don't think AI will be surviving if the destroyer comes. I don't think nothing's surviving that. Simultaneously, the text overlays moral and spiritual meaning. The destroyer is also a mechanism of divine judgment and purification. The Colburn clearly presents the destroyer as recurring. Past visits are remembered in legend or priestly records and will return in its appointed hour. Effects described encompass seismic, mountains opening. Yeah, it's just you're in deep shit. And then the wormwood star that makes the waters bitter. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. And then there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon its heads. Think about it, y'all. And then the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. You know, so this is just telling you, literally, all of these things that, you know, we've all wondered probably our entire lives, how that could even be possible, become possible when a giant celestial object is literally ripping through the neighborhood and, you know, killing everything in sight. So, right? Just saying. Just saying. And then finally, First Enoch and Watchers. Enoch contains wild astronomy and angelology, in which heavenly bodies and luminaries act strangely and angels descend, causing disorder. The Colburn's theme of heavenly restlessness and judgment echoes Enochic cosmology, the notion that celestial angelic events can directly impact Earth. Sumerian Mesopotamian motifs, Nibiru and cyclical ages. Modern occult and alternative researchers connect recurring cataclysmic motifs in Sumerian list and later myths. The examples given are the cyclical visitations of a great body. To the Colburn destroyer idea, scholarly caution: the specific Nibiru Planet X claim is a modern misinterpretation of ancient texts and not universally accepted by mainstream Assyriology. And then the global flood and dragon myths. Across cultures, red and fiery sky comes, dragons and great floods are linked, and the Colburn's narrative fits the broader pattern of cross-cultural cataclysmic myth. The destroyer is real, cyclical, celestial visitor, an approach that triggers multifaceted disasters. The cultural memory of the destroyer is preserved in priestly records, and it functions as both a cosmic agent and moral judicial mechanism. Yeah, so. I think we're gonna actually, you know, I mean, when you think about, like, you know, like I said, so basically, you know, taking a good look at all of it, you know, Babylon's destroyed in an hour, you know, because of its corruption. This thing comes when mankind becomes corrupt. When this thing comes, everything is destroyed, you know, on the earth. You see the whole process of Revelations, and it's like, and think about this too, and just kind of like, I'll leave you with this, like, think about how, you know, Hasidic Jews and stuff like that, they believe, you know, and not all, but some believe that they can bring about their Mashiach, their Messiah, you know, in one of two ways. One way is by being so good and so awesome, you know, that the Messiah comes to, you know, basically because we've ascended to that perfection, right? Which ain't gonna happen. And then the other way is by making things so bad and so terrible that the Messiah has no choice but to come and redeem everything, right? So, and that's why, in the occult and, in the mysteries and all of this, which we've talked about, this Whore of Babylon, right? The mystery Babylon, the mystery is something you have to be initiated into. So, this shows you, this comes from the occult. This is the spirit of the occult and these rituals and these mystery schools and these secret societies. And we talked about the kings and these, fallen angelic bloodlines and all of this. It all fits in and it all makes perfect sense when you look at it from this context, and it's all bringing about this end or this destruction. And this destruction comes upon Babylon and all the, in the world. But it happens in an hour and it happens in an instant. And when it does, it's, it's to bring renewal. And it's happened before and it'll happen again. Because things are cyclical, right? There's nothing new under the sun. So, I just think, we... and it's like, remember, it comes as a thief in the night. So it's up to us to be watchful, because coming in an hour is like not much time to prepare, Here in an hour, that means you don't have much time at all to prepare, to get ready for, for what's coming upon the earth, right? You can't even possibly prepare for that, It's here before you know it, So it's like, we got to be ready now, We got to be ready now. And it doesn't sound like it's something that can be avoided. So the only thing we can do is really prepare ourselves, spiritually, for this and make sure that we're ready when that day comes. And we're not caught off guard. Because remember, it's coming like a thief in the night. So most people will be sleeping. And think about the world. Most people are in fact asleep. So, I don't want you to be caught asleep when this comes either. So I'm going to say thank you to all of you guys for watching. If you enjoy my work, you enjoy what I do, and you want to support myself, this channel, independent media, which I know you guys are kind, giving, loving people. So you can do that by going to paypal.me, the Best Damn Podcast, Cash App, Best Damn Podcast, Facebook Pay, which is facebook.com, John Keane, Best Damn Podcast, or patreon.com, Best Damn Podcast Official. And you guys can donate, support there, join me there, and be greatly appreciated. And please like, share, subscribe if you haven't, wherever you're watching this from, BitChute, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, and share the links on your social media. Help me to spread the word and get it out there, and make sure to like it and comment and all that good stuff. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, Jesus the truth.